Welcome to week 4 of our 6-week journey into demystifying and discovering how to read the Bible. We are convinced that this book, when read consistently with faith and understanding, will revolutionize your life like nothing else can. And it'll do it over and over again for the rest of your life. We are unapologetically aiming to stoke the flames of passion in you, to see a love affair with the Bible birthed in your hearts as we seek to pursue Jesus and all He has for us through His Word. We believe that the Creator God has chosen to reveal Himself and His salvation plan to His creation through the Scriptures. Thus, the Bible is the inspired record of God's revelation of Himself and His salvation plan to mankind. Since the purpose of revelation is to be understood, it would be self-defeating for God to give us revelation of Himself that we would not understand, or demanded a superhuman intellect to unravel. No, God has revealed Himself in order to be known and understood, not to create confusion. Approaching the Bible in this light, we agree with the reformers who wrested the Scriptures back into the hands of ordinary folk from the religious elite in the 1500s, in saying that the main thrust of Scripture is clear to every genuine reader. One such reformer, John Calvin, put it this way: "Let us know that the true meaning of the Scripture is the natural and obvious meaning, and let us embrace and abide by it resolutely. Let us not only neglect as doubtful, but boldly set aside as deadly corruption those pretended expositions which lead us away from the natural meaning." In order not to fall into the trap of looking for things in Scripture that are just not there, it would be important to take note of 3 very helpful rules. Number 1, let Scripture interpret Scripture. Because God personally inspired the whole Bible, and since God is not confused and would therefore never contradict Himself, it follows naturally that different parts of the Bible cannot contradict each other. This is called the principle of harmony. Another example is the parable of the sower in Luke 8. After Jesus shares the parable, we read, "And when His disciples asked Him what this parable meant, Jesus answered them." In the verses that follow, Scripture interprets itself by telling us what Jesus meant. Often it is helpful to also ask the question, what does the rest of Scripture say? And that is where what is called a topical study can be helpful. This is when you gather together all the texts that relate to one topic in order to see what God's complete, expressed view on the topic is. For example, when reading in Corinthians, you read that its writer Paul expressed that it is often better not to marry. Just on that one verse alone, one could get into trouble forming an opinion on marriage. A topical study will then read up on all the verses on marriage, reading them in their literary and historical context, and then forming a proper opinion on God's design for marriage. Secondly, we must read from the text, not into it. We all have lenses that we view the world with, and we often bring those same lenses to the text. Although this is not entirely wrong, we must be careful not to read our situation or current worldview into the text. For example, those in World War II and apartheid read the Scriptures with a certain bias and lens and interpreted Scriptures to that end in horrific fashion. The technical word for this era is eisegesis, reading into the text. What we want to do is the opposite. It's called exegesis, which means drawing out from the text what the author intended to communicate. The major emphasis here is to be aware of your own heart as you read. Don't read to attempt to prove a point. Primarily, read with humility and in effect allow the Scriptures to read you. Thirdly and finally, trust the clarity of Scripture. This is what is called the perspicuity of Scripture. Though the Bible yields its mysteries, revelations, and insights over time, and only as one gives themselves to the reading of the Word, it is important to refuse to get caught up looking for hidden secret codes and messages. The best way to stay clear of this all too common error is to get a growing understanding of the meta-narrative of Scripture. The Bible is ultimately the story of God's redemptive plan for mankind with Jesus as the main star and attraction. Anything that clouds or obscures that fact needs to be moved away from as quickly as possible. 3 applications we can apply to ensure we get the clear meaning of Scripture is as follows. Number 1, the whole clarifies the part. Resist the urge to make sweeping theological statements based on one verse or even just one book. Let the whole of Scripture inform the smaller part rather than the other way around. Secondly, the plain clarifies the obscure. When faced with seeming contradictions or obscure portions of Scripture, pursue the plain meaning before being caught up and going down rabbit trails. Thirdly and finally, the new clarifies the old. Revelation is accumulative and progressive, so God's total perspective, the ideal position, is revealed in the New Testament, not the Old. So we reread everything through the lens of Jesus Christ and knowing that His redemptive work is the central theme pervading the whole of Scripture. Let us be a people that come under the authority and clarity of the Word as we allow the Word to have the loudest and clearest voice into our lives.